It is 9 a.m. and we're back. Like was predicted, I attempted to lay down to take a nap, like I told you, and the Everett Police Department via Unit 207 kept doing what they've been doing for the last 7 hours and just criminally and illegally shut off the internet to end that stream. I woke up because Art Bell stopped playing in the background. Do check out the description here, and you'll have a good idea of what criminal conduct they're already guilty of and what criminal conduct they've been guilty of for, again, the last 8 hours. If this live stream ends for any reason without me orally and explicitly telling you the end time, be advised I didn't end it, and the domestic terrorist upstairs did. So, since they keep using https://studio YouTube under local storage for their hacks since 2 in the morning per Kashana's instructions, I just cleared those out. They're empty now. They're gone from developer tools. I'm going to go back to trying to take a nap. So see description for details. Since Everett Police Department keeps using local storage to obstruct, tamper, intimidate, retaliate, threaten to perp the one and only felony they haven't yet made actionable, my murder without video and audio footage, using Kashana's AM hack of inserting criminal cookies from studio.youtube.com to local storage, i.e. their partitions, Linux machine upstairs, etc., to cut it off, as they've done from 2 a.m. to just now. I erased it from developer tools. Now, I would like to get some Z's, but as is evident from the Everett Police Department's criminal conduct via Unit 207 since 1 a.m. today. And all day Monday, it appears they would like to perp the only felony not yet made actionable that's left from my FBI report of 2017 and August 14th, 2024 tort claim. So we're just going to pin this message. Everett Police Department via Unit 207 guilty of so many felonies that they're looking at 35 to life without parole, with their one remaining felony to be made actionable. Come get your prize, terrorist. Now I'd like to take a nap, like I was trying to do. I revised it. Everett Police Department via Unit 207 guilty of so many felonies that those whom have not blown the whistle are looking at 35 to life without parole. Come get your prize, terrorists, stalkers, frauds, and felons. I'm going to pin it right on top. Then I went under developer tools session storage and cleared out their remote cast from their terrorist cell to plant cookies and inject static and internet cuts all AM so I can take a nap at 9:22 a.m. Okay. Are you done, Everett Police Department, or are we going to just continue playing this game like we've been doing since 2 a.m.? And you're going to do what you just did and wait till I lay down to go to sleep. And then repeat the process knowing I'll be asleep.
Welcome to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM from August 22nd, 1995.
From the high desert in the great American Southwest. Pretty neat place for a network, actually, to originate from. I bid you all good morning, good evening. Welcome to another edition of the best in live overnight talk radio, the largest as well, where you never know what is going to happen, where I never know what is going to happen. And that goes for tonight, once again. All right.
Once again.
Welcome. I'm
All right.
The hurricane season is heating up. This just came off Reuters. Check this out. It's going to be a quickening kind of night, I can tell you. The already busy Atlantic hurricane season got even busier Tuesday. Tropical storm, get this one, Humberto, and two new tropical depressions, I said two new ones, are brewing in the Atlantic. The National Hurricane Center says Humberto, with winds near 65 miles an hour, will probably turn into a hurricane Wednesday. That storm off the coast of the Cape Verde Islands in the western Atlantic, about 1,100 miles east of Humberto, an unnamed tropical depression has formed east of the Lesser Antilles. Forecasters expect that depression to strengthen, possibly becoming a tropical storm named Iris by Wednesday. Another tropical depression is swirling off the Andros Islands in the Bahamas. Forecasters say it could dump heavy rains on southern Florida. Now, I told you it was going to be so a lot of people told you the hurricane season was going to be fierce this year. And so far, they're right on the money. And it's just beginning. I mean, this is the opening chorus, folks, of what? Well, I knew about this story yesterday, but I really didn't want to comment on it until today, because I wanted to be sure I had the details correctly. And they were a little unsure yesterday, but they're not unsure today. It began with a late-night traffic accident in Detroit, and it ended incredibly with a woman jumping to her death from a bridge over the Detroit River.
This freaking story.
While now get this, dozens of people stood by and hooted and hollered and cheered. Now, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, as I said, on a bridge over the Detroit River. Witnesses say they saw a 33-year-old young black lady, Aletha Word, drive her car into another car, in other words, an accident. The other car contained 3 young guys. Angry, one of them took a crowbar and smashed all her windshields in. They dragged her from the car and ripped most of her clothes off during the scuffle. 30 to 40 people watched all of this and cheered and called for her, in fact, chanted for her to jump from the bridge. She did. Of all the people there, as many as 40, 2 of them at this late stage decided to try to save her jumped in, tried, but she was dead. The driver of the car, 20-year-old man, has been charged with second-degree murder. Her mother's comment, the mother of the dead young girl, said, "You know, I wouldn't treat a dog that way."
Oh my goodness. I don't know why I
Even
keep hearing
NBC
this
yesterday
episode
said the
today.
story stands as the more...
Maybe the suggestions it's giving for Art Bell are just the same 4 fucking episodes, I swear. $19.95. Oh, here we go. $19.94. It's not to be different. $19.95. Oh, 1993 Art Bell. Is there any on here from the 80s? This one's from 1993.
Angela Thompson between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. at area code 702-456-1606. That's Angela Thompson at area code 702-456-1606. And now, Area 2000. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Area 2000. Sunday at 8 o'clock is when it happens. I'm Art Bell on behalf of the Bigelow Foundation that makes this program possible. And I think you're going to find it indeed a fascinating one this morning. We've done a number of programs on Mars and on the artifacts that may or may not be on Mars. And this we have Professor Stanley McDaniel with us, who is going to talk about the author of this, the McDaniel report that got all this going, so we'll see if we can get to the bottom of it. As is the case just about every program, we're going to go all the way first, though, back to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
I'm curious though, how long did you guys have the live stream off before I had to wake up from the nap that you knew I was trying to get, the extra 4 hours of sleep that I wanted, since you've been fucking with my sleep for over a week now doing this same shit. Did I get 30 minutes of sleep? Did I get an hour? Was it off for 10 minutes? Was it off for an hour? I don't know. But I do know that there will be a live stream running when you're all detained. That I do know.
That are occurring around us right now. A phenomenon that happens only twice a year occurs again on December 21st at 3:26 p.m. At that moment, the sun will stand still in its winter solstice. The word solstice comes from Latin, which literally means sun to stand still. At the solstice, the sun stands, in a sense, in the same place as its southward motion relative to the background stars comes to a stop. After the solstice, which is only a day and a half from now, the sun's path starts shifting northward again, back toward longer and eventually warmer days. And all this is because our Earth tilts on its axis by 23.5 degrees as it orbits the sun. If that were changed in a slight extent, you might have an always cold north and an always hot south, or some other combination. So as it is, we'll have a fact that is perfect in such a way that we have the seasons and the changes that we do in life and living. For those of you who stayed up late on December 13th to 14th to see the Geminid meteor shower at its peak, there is another coming in the early morning hours of December 22, only 2 days from now. That is the Worsted meteor shower, which appears to come from the direction of a little different constellation. At around midnight on December 22, you should be able to see 20 meteors an hour until sunup. After Christmas and New Year's, conferences begin again and their exploration of the unknown. The Trial Research Conference series begins January 22nd to 23rd in Scottsdale, Arizona. Trial is interesting this year at the beginning of 94 on the question, are there intelligent life forms out there? Triad says that its goal is to bring challenging fields of research to locations around the country so that professional education can reach more people in more parts of the country more frequently. For ticket information, there is a phone number to call in
instead of to fucking sit here at the computer again like I already had to do for fucking hours and hours because being idiots.
882-6847. That's for ticket information for the Triad Conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, January 22 to 23 on the question, are there intelligent life forms out there? Researcher Angela Thompson with the Bigelow Foundation also has received a report from Freeport, Texas, that a radio man aboard a Coast Guard cutter said that around 1:30 in the morning on Sunday, December 14th, wallet and shaped object moved overhead. He said the object had an orange glow as it through binoculars and saw into through windows. According to the report, the object rose into the sky, turned a blue color, and then disappeared. The Coast Guard radio man said that shortly afterwards, two very bright objects shot up from the ground in the direction of the object, and they also disappeared. Tonight, our guest in Area 2000 is Dr. Stanley McDaniel, Professor Emeritus and former Chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Sonoma State University in California. This year, he published an analysis of research on unusual surface features in the Cydonia region of the planet Mars and raised some serious questions about NASA's mission priorities or lack of priorities in the Mars Observer regarding the Cydonia region. Now the observer appears to be lost for yet unknown reasons, but Professor McDaniel's report emphasized that the scientific analysis by several scientists of an unusual face-like feature and nearby pyramid-like features in 1976 Viking orbiter photos.
So apparently I need to sit here looking at the task manager, and as they start to drop the KBSs, I need to clear out their criminal and illegal casting in those cookies that I listed in the live chat in the preceding live stream. Next ID. They're using Next ID and request upstairs to terminate the live stream, knowing that each one act of even attempting to do that is a series of felonies. Like the FBI told their dumb fucking asses when the FBI had me turn on my phone after 4 months to bait them in January of 2025 so that they could perpetrate the premeditated kidnapping, assault of me, and unlawful entries and vandalism and planting of evidence with their USBs onto these devices so they could carry on and keep doing the same thing. Right now, you are all adding conspiring to murder me, attempts to murder me, and threatening an FBI informant with murder to your indictments, which each and every re-implantation of those Next ID and request cookies, fools. And you're still preventing me from taking a fucking nap. I didn't even get to sleep for a solid hour, and I had to get up because you can't control yourselves and you're about to go to prison for the rest of your lives.
There's really no way of verifying dealing remotely sent imagery. And, Mars is just one example. But whenever we're doing studies of satellite imagery of the Earth and doing landform analysis, you really need to look at the ground truth because you can be fooled by imagery. And you really need to go there to know for sure, or you have imagery that's just so good that there's no question about it, and that's not the case. Quite frankly, I think I feel that, and I always have felt that there's a fairly good chance that this is artificial. But I like to be conservative and kind of keep things, keep things conservative in my head on this. Was it your own personal first thought and you began to think, my God, this is artificial? Like I said, it was almost an intuition when I first saw the face on Mark's newspaper article that something about it just sort of grabbed me and easily captured me. Like real artificial face staring at the surface of Mars, even though it's kind of a light of it. There's something about it that just sort of grabbed me. And the more we worked with it, the more I've worked with it, the more I'm convinced there is something there, because essentially every test and experiment that I've done has indicated that it is unusual. The one thing I did mention was the fractal analysis. It all only works published peer-reviewed journals with methodology and evaluated it. And in fact, your methodology medicine provides other imagery, planetary as well as terrestrial imagery. But the fractal analysis showed the face to be the least natural object for an area off the side of the state of Rhode Island. This is really all the imagery I had available at the time. What the fractal analysis does is it, if you will, it ranks the image by its degree of artificiality. And it uses fractals as models for deciding whether something in an image is artificial and natural. Fractals are a big use to model a whole range of natural phenomena. In fact, if I seeing the Star Trek II Genesis, where they create this magnificent planet called photographic fractals. The essence of doing fractal analysis is turning it around instead of using fractals to generate images, using fractals to analyze it. And to do this, they stand out like a sore thumb. It's being totally anomalous. In fact, being the most anomalous feature over this area I mentioned, slightly greater than the state of Rhode Island. And then the question that remains is, if it is artificial, why did somebody do something that was a mile high and a mile and a half long?
Oh, I can't do this audio, whatever that little clip is that just keeps skipping.
Yes, I mean,
Probably because the fact that it's
that's a
37
loaded
years
question.
old.
Very
distracting from the audio.
A lot of people have speculated on terrestrial connections, and
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening, good morning, as the case may be, across all these many time zones, from the Hawaiian to each island chain, east all the way across this great land to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and south into South America, north to the Pole, worldwide on the internet. This is Coast to Coast AM. I'm Marcel, and tonight,
The Mystery Man.
Richard C. Oakland, Engstrom Science Award winner, advisor to NASA, advisor to Walter Cronkite during the good years when we were sending men into space and thinking about Mars. And I don't know what he's going to talk about tonight. He sort of wouldn't tell me what he's going to talk about tonight. I said, well, then how can we approach this? He said, well, and you'll ask good questions. So we'll try to do that here in a minute. Ask good questions. So we'll get to all that coming right up. The Sanjin, here he comes from Manhattan, where it's a little after 2 in the morning, but he tells me he's had a nap. Richard C. Hoagland. Hi, Richard. I'm with you here.
Well, a difficult beginning, to say the least. Poor Richard. So what we're going to do is leap ahead and let me take care of a little extra business that won't hurt anyway. And, well, anyway, here he is from Manhattan. Hi, Richard.
Hi there.
Well,
Yeah, you were kind of putting me on hold there. I was waiting for the music and the news and all that, and then you went away.
whoosh, huh? All right, well, here we are anyway. We're on the air. And, you've been torturing me with this for the last few days. When you originally called and said, yes, I'll be ready to do a show Friday. But you wouldn't tell me all about it. And as I told the audience, your response to me was, well, Daniel, ask good questions. And I don't know if they'll be good questions or not. I have a feeling, I want to guess.
Just to let you guys know, a little domestic terrorist, I'm getting to the point where I'm just going to go to sleep, and then the next time your dumbasses are outside
NASA,
banging on the door because you think the live stream is terminated, I'm just going to reinitiate and/or initiate one and shove the camera right in the fucking window at your dumb faces.
Atlantis. Have you ever wondered, Art, why we have a space shuttle named Atlantis?
You know what?
Just a little heads up, because I've had enough of I only get to sleep for 3 hours because the Everett Police Department upstairs is scared that they're going to prison for the rest of their lives, like each and every one of them that has not blown the whistle has and is currently requested.
That was Atlantis. More, I always thought, a myth than a reality.
Well, you don't start thinking of these things until you get into the thicket, into the woods, and start lifting up the branches and the rocks.
Or to put it another way, we're real sick of getting 3, maybe 4 hours of sleep for over a week straight as you continue to attempt to perpetrate the one and only remaining felony to be made actionable.
Suddenly take on a totally different meaning. And the reason I'm starting with that rather tiny datum is because it's real. No one can contest tonight that NASA, the uptight engineering enclave of modern.
So just let that be your warning. Don't be surprised, because I really am serious. I think I might just go to sleep, and then the next time there's a knocking, that's what's going to occur. And I'm just going to ignore the device.
A variety of ships and spacecraft and missions after all kinds of historical and documentable sources. Clipper ships named Intrepid, famous exploration ships named Challenger, famous other ships named Enterprise, although the lineage of that one is kind of interesting. But there is an Enterprise on station tonight in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, keeping watch over the Mideast. In other words, every part of NASA's lineage traces back to a very specific, verifiable, eminently historical association, except
Atlantis.
Now, what in the world in that company do we have a myth that uniformly, if you wake up any historian or Egyptologist tonight, which you probably should anyway because they should be listening to your show, they will tell you that it's all a myth. It's all Plato made it up. The Egyptian priests kind of fed him a bunch of, caca long before the New Age. It ain't real. It doesn't exist. There's nothing like it.
But I was like, Richard, who in NASA, or what group in NASA, comes up with these names? That's probably something we ought to know.
Well, offhand, I specifically don't know. I mean, obviously, it's one of those questions you want to find out. But it's like, who named Apollo? Who named Mercury?
Right.
Who named the Gemini program? There, we actually do have a name. His name was Dr. Abe Silverstein. He was a very respected, brilliant engineer and official at the Lewis Research Center in Ohio, where coincidentally I've been invited, years later to speak 3 times on our investigation. It always amused me that while they were taking pot shots at us at other sides of NASA,
yes,
that other NASA centers were inviting us in the front door over and over and over again to lay out what we and our teams have been finding over the years.
That is a mystery. NASA has invited you in, and I always thought that strange because I rather always thought they'd send a hit team out for you. and so then what are they doing inviting you to speak?
Well,
that's weird.
1 or 2 times you can say that, the kind of guys invited to the party to jump out of the cake. But after the 4th or 5th or 6th invitation, you begin to get the pattern that maybe some folks on the inside want to know what the folks on the outside know. And the best way to find out what they know is to invite them into the inside so they are what they know.
Maybe they think there's a reverse conspiracy theory, Richard. and that they know nothing on the inside, and we know it all out here. And we're keeping it from them. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. So what I want to do this morning, and it's going to take us some time to do this because we do not have images. The one bane of radio is that we don't have images to work with. This is not like television or even now like the internet.
Wait a minute. You don't have pictures of Atlantis, and you're going to try and convince us that it's real, right? Okay.
What we do have in radio, which is why it is my favorite medium, is we have a little cherished quality of the human system, the human imagination, called imagination.
Theater of the mind.
Exactly. And with all the data that we have presented over the years, we're going to draw upon all of that this evening, at the wee hours of this morning, as the Terminator sweeps westward. And we are going to limb out the most extraordinary puzzle, connecting the dots, as my friend Zoe Hieronymus said in Washington this morning. And by the end of this program, I hope that people will be intrigued. They will want to pursue the evidence we're going to lay out on the World Wide Web and Enterprise on our website. They are going to want to join us at Cape Canaveral on the 3rd of November when yes, Ken, I have just promoted you. When engineer Ken Johnston Jr., formerly at NASA, currently at Boeing, is going to join me for a 3-hour briefing of the public and press at Brevard County Community College on the evening of Sunday night, November 3rd, 3 days before NASA launches the next unmanned mission back to Mars. And we are going to lay out many, many pieces of this puzzle with illustrations, graphs, documents, and all the things you can't see on radio.
All right, we are launching again to Mars. What are we launching?
We are launching on actually at 12:09, which is this afternoon, on November the 6th, one day after the election, an unmanned spacecraft called Mars Global Surveyor, which is kind of like a half makeup for the missing Mars observer. This is a 2-spacecraft launch. This first one is going to carry about half of the instruments Mars observer was going to put into orbit 2 years ago around Mars, and didn't because it disappeared a couple of days before it was supposed to get there.
Right.
In 2 years from now, in 1998, the second half of this dual mission will be launched, Mars Surveyor 2, and it will carry the other half of the instrument component into Mars orbit. In fact, I think it's going to land a rover, a mini rover on Mars, if I'm not mistaken.
So these are
So as you can see here in the chat, again, those cookies, next ID and request, also clearing session storage or studio.youtube.com, where their cast info from upstairs and outside of my door appears. I did just warn them that I am tired of not being able to sleep because of their inability to stop perping felonies, and I may simply ignore the live stream until they show up next, like they did earlier today without knocking. Yes, boy, I knew you were outside of my door less than 30 minutes ago with your little Google sticks, your Sony Kick, whatever kind of stick it is.
It depends on who you talk to.
I just didn't put it in the chat, boy.
And the day you talk to them, whether there's an eclipse when you talk to them, whether they've gotten out of the left
And I am
side of the bed
tired
or the
of
right
not
side
being
of the
able to
bed.
sleep
There are
because of
very
your
confusing,
inability to
contradictory
control
signals coming
yourself.
from NASA regarding the re-imaging of Cydonia.
Like the
And
4
they
instances
began
on Monday,
with a question
for
at
example.
the Mars,
So I may just launch a
press
live
conference
stream
on
once you're ready
August
to
7th.
be detained,
Remember the major press conference on the
and begin to
microfossil?
ignore this one
People jumping up and
completely so I
down
can
over
get some
something
sleep.
tiny and
Yes.
invisible that had been dead 3.5 billion years.
Yes.
Well, one of our associates actually was able to ask the question, Elaine Douglas, in the audience there at NASA headquarters.
So consider
asked the
that,
question of Dr.
you know, like
Golden,
they say on NPR.
Dan Golden,
So
the
consider
administrator at
this.
NASA, and Dr. Wes Huntress, who is the deputy administrator or associate administrator for space science, where they're going to take new pictures of Cydonia. And on our web, you will see the verbatim transcript of their respective reply, which is the most artful example, you know, Bill Clinton notwithstanding, of saying two simultaneous things to two simultaneous audiences, neither of which they think, I guess, will ever talk to each other. Because according to Dr. Golden, this is not a high priority. In fact, it's not a priority at all. And then he demurred to Dr. Huntress for the detail. Dr. Huntress picked up the theme and said, well, it's not a priority. It's not a priority at all. I'm paraphrasing. And it's unlikely that we're going to get a picture, but we certainly are going to get better pictures than we got last time. Huh? Come again, Wes? In other words,
And if you think
it
I
began in
played,
a paradox
just
in the
test
puzzle,
it,
because
boy.
it's
I'm
not
so
in the
ready to go to
database,
sleep. I
it's
know you
not
guys
being
have been
prioritized,
yippee-yapping about your
but they
plans
say
for
they're going to
today
get
at
more
around
perfect
1
than they got last time.
p.m. for over fucking 24
Right,
hours.
sure.
You're not going to do anything today.
Well, the press conference
Say with
happened
me.
on the
Say with
16th of
me.
October,
It's not new
Right.
news.
and after that,
The Bureau says I'll be
Hubbard,
here every
who was the science
weekend
editor
of
for
this
USA
month.
Today,
And it's
apparently
Wednesday,
cornered Dr. Gold
and
between
it's
a couple of cups of
only
coffee. And got
June
him on record,
25th.
and I think
That's right.
what you have in front of you.
No, not necessarily. Mine says, let's see, Cydonia face-to-me image, FaceTime.
So
While
again, I'm
Sojourner
tired.
is set to
I may
crawl
just
around
ignore
the
the
core
live
of an
stream and
ancient
sleep
shell
until the
turned
next time
between
you're
what
outside
carries
stalking me on the
liquid water.
exterior,
The Mars Global
making
Surveyor
noises
is running
other than
massive
creeping
science
around
from a
with your little
core orbit
stick.
that will take it over most points on the surface 26 times during a 687-day Martian year. That is going to include the so-called phase on Mars, counted in the tabloids as evidence of a past Martian civilization that NASA is trying to cover up. Arden Albee, Global Surveyor Project Scientist, says the project plans to alert the local Face on Mars lobby, read Richard Hoagland and Company, whenever imagery from the region where the face was spotted is coming up, and to post that imagery on the internet as soon as it is collected. Quote, we think we have done all the things that we can possibly do in the framework of this mission to try to address this question of the face on Mars. End quote.
Okay, this is the statement by
In fact, the
Goldman
more I think
and
about it, the more I'm
the
inclined to
spokesperson
do
is
just
Arden
that.
Albee, who is the
I think I'll just have a
project
piece of
scientist
bread
for
and
the
butter
coalition.
and go to
This was
sleep.
of the
And then
article
once
10,
you're outside the door, we'll kick
2196.
off the live stream.
Okay, so we are talking the same thing. Now, according to sources I have, Golden a couple days ago retreated from that
Sounds
position,
like a plan,
claiming that
baby.
They were not going to provide what they call near virtual real-time imagery. That means that as soon as it gets back from the spacecraft at the speed of light, they'll put it up on the net and put it up on TV.
Well, what the hell are they going to do with it?
Well, we have reporters now asking them what it means that they are not quite going to do that. And we're going to find out, obviously, we have a year or more to find out what exactly they are going to do. But this is one of the reasons why I'm going to Cape Kennedy, actually Cape Canaveral, the Kennedy Space Center on Cape Canaveral, with Ken Johnston on the 3rd, because the way this came about, before the press conference and before the statement you just read, NASA's position was, as it had been over the last several years, that there would be no live television, no prioritization of Cydonia, etc. Incidentally,
All right, listen, Richard, this is going to take a moment to develop, so stay right there. And we'll come back to you. By the way, it launches November 6th. Isn't that what you said?
that's correct, Wednesday.
Do you think it has a better chance or a lesser chance than Bob Dole being elected on November 5th? That is, of getting to Mars. We'll let that one hang in the air and come back in just a moment. Richard C. Oakland is my guest. You're listening to the American CBC Radio Network. All right.
Good morning.
All right. So we've got this machine to launch back to Mars. And really, I was joking, but I wasn't joking. Do you think it will make it?
Yes, I think it's going to make it. I think that Albie's comments and Golden's comments, and most important, Sagan's comments last year gave us a heads up that up to the point where we get pictures of Cydonia, this mission is going to work. The key question and this I want everyone listening tonight to take very seriously, the key question is, are those pictures going to be real? Because if this is all a Shaggy Dog story, if we are being set up for the biggest con in history, then it doesn't matter if they're live or not. The fix is already in. Now, the reason I say this is because what we're going to present, what Ken and I are going to present at Brevard Community College on the night of the 3rd, is absolute, overwhelming, conclusive proof that NASA, or some in NASA, in key positions. I want to be very clear to separate the rank and file. Most of the 400,000 people who worked on Apollo and the 20-some thousand people who currently work for NASA from those who are determining policy, which is a tiny handful of people.
Okay.
Those people have been lying to us for over 30 years. Let me repeat that. These people who are in charge of NASA policy not the rank and file, have been lying not only to us, but to the rest of NASA for over 30 years, and Ken and I are going to lay out with highly specific examples, documented, specific examples, over and over again, exactly how this was accomplished, how broad it is, how deep it is, how wide it is, and how it goes back, apparently, to the beginning of the space program itself.
Really?
Now, having said that, and I'm going to present, hopefully, some of that evidence in a form that radio can accommodate, but you really need to see this in terms of the visuals and the documentation, so we're going to put it all up on the web in the next several days. Actually, it's probably going to take us a couple of weeks to put it all up there, because there is so much, and our schedule is so hectic, and there are meetings on both coasts that I have to be in attendance for. Other things are being pursued in parallel with this particular part of the campaign.
All right, well, I'm going to stop you here, Richard, and I try to listen very carefully to what you say. And in a previous program, you said that NASA was shooting straight, was really a good agency, told the truth up until a certain point. And now you said you think they've lied since the beginning. You've changed your mind.
No, the data has moved on. See, everyone in this game, and by game I mean the whole UFO, ET, anomalous phenomenology community, most of the people out there are basically voicing opinion. The problem with opinion is you can change it any day of the week and it doesn't matter. What this investigation from the beginning art has tried to do is to follow the data, where the data leads.
All right.
As new information comes to light, as new documents are given to us, as new people come on board, and there have been several key step functions when people within the system have come over to our side and start providing us with evidence and documentation. And, Ken Johnson is a critical example. If we had not had his untouched database of thousands of photographs going back 30 years, carefully socked away in the Oklahoma City University archive and in his own private collection, we would not have the mechanism to compare and to convert the data sets and analyses against what we've been getting out of NASA's own file.
All right, I can go along with that. All right, then what data has changed?
That's what we're going to take the morning to go through step by step. I want to do this in a very orderly way because it's going to be hard to follow without the internet. And since most people in America are not going to be able to get to the Cape and to show up for these demonstrations on both coasts, and I'll get to what I mean by that in a minute.
Got a lot of listeners in Florida, so...
And a lot will not be able to get to the web because they don't have computers not on the web.
Right.
Well, that's changing every day. But when we did a survey in Seattle, as you know, I just came back from there, the MC actually asked for a show of hands as to how many people have been aware of what we're doing through advertisements, through newspapers, through television, through radio, through the web. And overwhelmingly, Art, most of the people who came to our seminars listen to the show.
Sure.
That's why I want to do this show. This show we know has impact, and when people are properly motivated, they can make their presence and their voices heard.
Right.
And I'm going to ask the audience later this morning to do a couple of specific things to help as part of this revelatory process.
Okay.
Let me go back to the beginning. This all starts with the absolute essential cornerstone of any science, which is honest verification. If you don't have honest verification, you don't have an honest attempt to acquire new data.
Also, you might not know this, ladies and gentlemen, but
then you're up a creek.
there are chips
If you can
in
prove that the agency
any
in
stick
charge
that
of
you
getting
have.
that data on Mars has not been honest, then in analogy to the OJ trial, the first one or this one or whatever one,
I said that
the
because
judge, or in this case, the
I'm not
jury,
the only
American
one that's so
people have a
bothered
right to
by
basically
the
look at the witness, i.e.
100+
ask them to say, well,
instances
look, if
of
you lied to us on
your
this and
domestic
this and this,
terrorist
how can we possibly
members
believe you on that?
coming downstairs and
that's
waving your
really
little
what this is
sticks
all
at my
about. What we're
condo.
trying to do is to basically alert the American people.
The
the
Bureau
taxpayers
has
who are
stated you're
sending
being
this mission
charged for
back to
each and
Mars,
every one of those
to the fact that
instances,
after
boys
this
and
enormous
girls.
effort to get new data on Sidonia, in fact, we may not be able to
So
trust
shout out to
the
the one
data
guy upstairs
itself
that always
because
tells the most
process
obnoxious
is
and
flawed.
annoying
All right,
girl
prove
up there,
them
the
wrong.
harasser.
Well, let me
No.
see how we start, all right?
All right.
I like the way he rolls because she's just stopped
You
asking
and I
him. She just
have
asked
shared
everybody
this
else who does it.
in
Especially the
in
boys who
Egypt
think she's
by
cute.
way
She
of
just keeps asking
Hancock
over and over and
Bernal,
over again.
several months.
Yes.
I shared it long before because
She's upstairs
if you
right
look
now.
at
She's
the
been
Mars
busy
data
harassing
from Sidonia,
That's why I got to sleep for less than an hour
One
just
can
now.
make with the face on Mars is the Sphinx in Egypt. Most of the people who write to me or fax me or in correspondence note at some point or other this incredible similarity.
So again, what I put in the chat, I think
from NASA.
I'm gonna lay down here shortly, and they're gonna shut off the live stream. And I'll start the live stream within 30 seconds of the next time they're pounding on my door, trying to break in, standing out there squawking.
Connection, some relatedness. I agree. As we went through our analysis, beginning in
That's where I'm at.
83, and brought experts on board at SRI and the University of California, and people
Again,
like
happy
Mark
hump day.
Corrado and Errol Torren and people like Horace Crater became involved, and many others that I'm obviously not going to be able to mention all of them tonight.
For those of you who might just be tuning in or watching this as a one-off, you got to watch the preceding live stream. They've been doing this shit since 1 or 2 in the morning. It's now 10, 11 a.m.
Pyramids became much more.
I've been able to sleep for less than 1
I
hour
was able to stay with the UN
because of
in February of 1992, and this, of course, is part of the UN tape that we have available, and lay out for the audience in the Doc Hammarskjöld Auditorium and for all those who have purchased the video subsequently, a most astonishing point-by-point connection between the ruins of Sidonia, the monuments of Mars.
And for those of you that are like, well, then you must not be taking the threat very seriously. Oh, no, I am. But I also know that the Bureau said that
starting with the fact
I'm going to be here every weekend of this month.
Cairo, the root word for Cairo, means
I'm going to speculate
Mars.
here that they told me that so that when you guys were doing this stupid shit, I would just go
going on to the fact that the location of these two sites on their respective planets, the Giza Plateau, the site of the pyramids and Sphinx on Earth,
because their pattern of criminal conduct, as is demonstrated in YouTube live streams, hundreds of them posted on youtube.com/mysticquaid, is committing crimes and running drills hundreds and hundreds of times, giving up, criminally and illegally shutting off the internet,
if you look at a planet,
and then giving the FBI a dozen plus individuals to throw in prison on one day.
You can measure the latitude of the Sphinx and the pyramids.
So I'm guessing that's what the FBI is.
Roughly 30 degrees north latitude. Actually, they're about 29 degrees and several,
the same shit they did.
Minutes, but it's close enough to say 30 degrees as a round number. Okay. That latitude in degrees has, if you remember your high school trigonometry, various trigonometric functions attached to it. Ratios, decimals, sines, cosines, tangents. And the cosine of 30 degrees is 0.865. Again, round numbers, folks, for those out there whipping out their calculators to check me. Okay? All right. That cosine latitude equivalent of the Giza pyramids and Sphinx on Earth is precisely the same, again, round numbers, to the tangent of the latitude of the Martian face and the city on Mars and Sidonia. The tangent of 41 degrees north latitude is the cosine of 30 degrees north latitude. And 41 degrees north latitude is the latitude of the collection of objects on Mars. 30 degrees north latitude is the collection of objects on Earth that look eerily similar. Now, it was the Russian Vladimir Levinsky, the geologist back in the early 1980s, who wrote a provocative piece in the Moscow News that I spent a lot of time chasing down to the Soviet consulate in San Francisco, because it was so eerily similar to our own investigation, which was, in process at that time. And I discovered, to my satisfaction, and I acknowledged him in monuments, that in fact this wasn't an example of Chekhov.
Also, shout out to all the whistleblowers upstairs who know that the nickname the harasser is so aptly fitting.
It turned out was correct. Levinsky had independently,
for Little Miss, has such bad anxiety that we all have to suffer from
I've been looking at this provocative set of imagery from the.
It would be hard for me as a whistleblower to stare and to hear that that's her nickname. Every time that I heard it, I would be holding back a laugh.
And he published in the same time frame an independent assessment, which was provocative to me for a couple of reasons. Not only because
I'd be bringing in a dozen donuts every day just so she shoves one in her little mouth for an hour so I could have
to what ours would
silence.
eventually be. And that was, he called the face for the first time on record the Martian Sphinx. How eerily prescient Vladimir turned out to be. Yes. And I want to acknowledge him over and over again, because that's what science is supposed to be, acknowledging good seminal work. Number two, in the same study, which eventually was reprinted by the KGB in that high-quality, glossy, four-color magazine that was kind of like Life magazine. It was called Soviet Life.
Okay, it seems like my notice was taken
in
seriously.
DC.
Yeah.
They're up there discussing, looking through the manual.
Within days of our presenting,
They don't like the idea of me
that Rautenberg and
just
I
turning on a
and
live
Brandenburg
stream when they're
and
outside.
and others all participating in our first SRI study had collaborated on and had given to John to present. That's the case for Mars Conference
do you
in Boulder,
remember
Colorado in the summer of '84.
This time yesterday,
Within days of that
and a few
paper,
hours after that, they had plans for today at around 1 p.m.
By Avinsky, called Pyramids on Mars.
But also remember that the Bureau is confident that they're not going to be trying to shoot me in the head at least until July.
And they were the ones proposing it was artificial and that it was connected to Egypt. And Avinsky,
or to put it another way, the Bureau is confident no one's going to be kidnapping and assaulting and unlawfully entering and breaking and entering and vandalizing or any of that shit
of the city and the pyramids
until July.
to the face. That's Sidonia. In other words,
why do you think the Bureau is confident like that? I'm going to speculate it's because there's still an internet connection.
It was Carl.
Hey, I'm lying down to take a nap. The live stream ends for any reason without me being explicitly telling you that. You know who did
A little bit older than he is.
Every individual that's looking at 35 to life in prison without parole, where they'll be spending their summer in county and jail getting acquainted with that lifestyle.
If you want to look down on another planet and see if there's anybody at home, look simple.
Okay.
And that's the rule of thumb we've been using. Now, Carl kind of forgot what he wrote. And for 15 years has been telling everybody that we're crazy, that we don't know what we're talking about, that there's nothing there, there's tricks of light and shadow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, up until December of last year, when in his latest book, called The Demon Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark, what a title, he says in chapter 3, but I might be wrong. And then he proceeds to lay out specifically why the Sidonia problem, the face on Mars problem, the pyramid problem at Sidonia is different from UFOs, is in fact science, is in fact testable. And then he, the man, implores that the next missions going back, i.e. Surveyor, Pathfinder, the Russia 96 missions, they take the photographs to once and for all resolve this issue, which would be fine if we could trust the agency taking the pictures. But we cannot, because it turns out that our interest in Egypt and our linkage at the UN between the Sidonia site and the Giza site is not the first that someone has been interested in Mars and in Earth and in possible connection. And we have now found in NASA's own data set evidence, compelling evidence to indicate that NASA knew before the Viking missions ever went to Mars that Sidonia was there, and they timed the taking of their first picture from that Viking orbiter on the afternoon of July 25th, 1976, precisely at the optimum time to record its presence in a context that is meaningful in connection with a lot of other data we've now uncovered, and that's the data that needs the photographs and the imagery to lay out.
All right, how did they know it was there before?
Well, remember, Viking was not the first. Viking follows the famous and brilliantly successful Mariner 9 mission
Yes.
in 1971. And I was present when Mariner 9 became the first spacecraft successfully placed in Mars orbit in November of 1971. I was there with Von Braun and Arthur Clarke and Phil Chapman and a whole bunch of other, space groupies. We used to gather at JPL for these periodic planetary parties as part of my, CBS, activities.
This was back in the days when you thought NASA was on us.
Exactly. We all thought NASA was on us. We all thought that NASA was giving us the solar system. Right. They found it.
All right. So
one possibility. Now, again, we're going to mix tonight hard facts and informed speculation. I'm going to try to alert people to which is which.
All right.
The facts are that we've got data unequivocally demonstrating that NASA knew that Sidonia was there before Viking got there and took the pictures that we've all come to know. The speculation is, and keep me honest on this, Art, the speculation is, how do they know? The one possible answer is that Mariner 9 was there before Viking. And it spent several years in orbit and took over 100,000 pictures. And it is quite likely that among those pictures, most of which nobody has had time to look at or has seen, because the files on Mariner 9 are so chaotic and so disorganized. And I know this because during our first years in the independent Mars investigation at SRI, we had dedicated people like John Brandenburg and Vince DiPietro go to Goddard and try to get photographs from the Mariner 9 sequences to kind of corroborate some of the things we were looking at in the Viking data. And we found at that point that at the NSSDC, they were hopelessly misfiled and not organized at all the way you would want them to.
So you're not claiming to have found Mariner 9 data?
No, we have not found the Mariner 9 Sidonia frame. We have not.
All right.
But it is logical to presume that as part of that very exhaustive and comprehensive mission, with somewhat primitive television systems, but they were comparable to what was on Viking. So the technology really hadn't changed between the two space missions. Even though Mariner 9 was in 71 and Viking was in 76, the technology was basically the same. It is reasonable to presume that they had a heads up because of the Mariner 9 data.
Do we know that Mariner 9 overflew the area?
Yes, we do.
We do.
Mariner 9 overflew everything and photographed all of Mars down to a resolution of, several hundred meters. And when they lowered the orbit, they actually got selected regions at higher resolution. And I don't remember enough of the mission without referring to the documents and the ephemeras and all that to know what areas they looked at in close-up. But it is a reasonable presumption that if they had a heads up, it came from Mariner 9.
Okay.
The more extraordinary possibility, I'm going to get into some very extraordinary possibilities to give people a feeling for how wide we have to cast our net based on the remarkable data we now have confirmed. The most remarkable possibility of all, I'm going to come back to this again and again and again through the morning, is that what's going on in Egypt is not the first effort to find secret rooms and archives under the Giza Plateau.
They've already been there, done that.
Maybe 100 years ago.
100 years ago?
Sure. The Mideast opened up about 100 years ago. We discovered in the 1700s, Napoleon was interested in Egypt. And when was it the Champollion, broke the code of hieroglyphics?
Yeah.
But archaeology, British archaeologists, French archaeologists, German archaeologists have been crawling over, under, and around and through Egypt for at least 200 years.
Secret knowledge. All right, Richard, you've got to hold it right there. We'll be back to you, and we'll try and wring the rest from him. I've got a little fax here. It says, Miss Bell, strangle him now. You have him in your grasp. What about all that stuff about the moon? Hoagland must die. Hoagland must die. Sphinx or no Sphinx, Hoagland must be put to sleep. Mr. Kevorkian, we need you now. Richard Hoagland, back in a moment. NASA cannot possibly send a hitman after Richard Hoagland. It's not in their budget. All right, Richard. So,
we seem to be evoking interesting feelings this morning.
Well, there's more substantial faxes, but I can't resist the fun. We'll get to those. Richard, somebody may have been in the Sphinx chambers 100 years ago.
Well, even earlier, I have a couple of faxes here from some of our own sources, and they point out that the Mideast has been combed over and crawled over by people ever since the Crusades who were fanatically and frantically looking for the Holy Grail. And when you're really on a mission and you're financed by various kings and princes and under the banners of religion and taking back the Holy Land and all that, who knows what could have been found and squirreled away and saved. I mean, we all know those rumors of all the things in the catacombs under the Vatican, the so-called libraries.
Right.
There is a lot of data that we know from standard mainstream sources is not generally available to the public. There are, the modern era of national security and black budgets is not the first time that human beings have really cornered knowledge and information and kept it away from other people because because knowledge is power.
Look, Richard, there's been a lot of water under the Sphinx paw since we last spoke. And what my audience will remember from the last time you were on the air was Bilal and Hancock and yourself locked in seemingly mortal combat for a lot of the night about what was about to maybe happen at Giza. Now, I don't know how much we can tell and how much we can't tell about what we think we might know and what might or might not be happening at Giza, but we ought to try and go as far with this as we can to update from the last show.
Yeah, well, we intend to.
Okay.
And what all I'll say is that truth is a moving target, Art. You know, what was it? Who was it that said the consistency is the hobgoblin of small minds?
Yeah.
And it's not that, you know, we're politicians and we're changing our position, which is what I love about, you know, campaigns. Science is constantly reinventing itself because it is a successful approximation of truth.
Sure.
Our data tonight is different and better than it was when you and I did the show with Graham and Bilal some weeks ago. We know more. In fact, I know enough tonight that I am going to make a prediction specifically on your show for the first time ever as to when this darn secret chamber is going to be opened on Giza. Irrespective of all the machinations, all the politics, all the committees, all the strange Byzantine, you know, Mideast stuff we've been talking about, I'm going to give you a flat prediction of when it's going to happen tonight on your show. Based on what we have figured out that is not out of Egypt, it's out of NASA. It's out of data that is in public domain. All you got to do is know how to put it together. And that's the neat part about science. This is democratic. Anybody can do this, folks. All you got to do is really want to do it and be as determined to get to the bottom of this as I and my colleagues, and you too, can have the same kind of fun we're having.
All right. Zahi was. He is the antiquities curator. He's the guy who's in charge at Giza. Is that correct?
Giza Plateau.
All right. Linda Moulton Howe did an interview following our last show. In it, she interviewed Mr. Ross, who said about the following, Richard. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, accused people of doing bad science, talked about Bilal and Hancock and included them in the group bad science, and there were some threats made and so and so. Then he said, look, there's nothing in those chambers. Those chambers, he said, were opened, I forget, back in the 1920s or something, and they're going to open them, and there's going to be nothing in those chambers. That's what he said with Linda Moulton Howe.
Okay.
So
that's one man's opinion.
One man's opinion.
I mean,
are we all talking about the same chambers?
Well, probably not. I mean, if you look at the stela, which is basically a flat, carved, engraved stone, flat slab, tablet, that's erected between the paws of the Sphinx, right in front of its breast, which is very old, thousands of years old. It shows on this flaking stelae, which is the technical term for it, carved, you know, thousands of years before the present, a Sphinx crouching on the top of a chamber which has multiple cavities and rooms and caverns and tunnels.
Yes.
I mean, there is a literally schematic depiction of the Sphinx on a plateau honeycombed with cavities. And I imagine, you know, given some of the hints we've had from the recent investigations, ground-penetrating radar and seismographs and the like, that there are a lot of potential cavities that either could or could not contain interesting or uninteresting artifacts and or records and or stuff.
How much do we know about that, Richard? The X-ray work that has been done, I think it's the University of Florida has been doing and others have done. What do we know? How many chambers or what have we seen? Can you tell us that?
Well, we know there was a rumor some months ago that there were 9 chambers discovered, 9 of them, with metallic artifacts.
Metal that would show up on an X-ray.
No, it's not X-ray. This is ground-penetrating radar. This is microwave wavelength radar.
Right, radar.
And the way that the instrument measures cavities versus objects in them is by means of reflectivity. You know, the wavelengths, the radio waves, go through the ground, through the sand.
Sure.
And they are absorbed to varying degrees by moisture. As you know, the water table under the plateau is rising. That's been part of the explanation for the erosion of the Sphinx, which is not correct. The Nile water table is not responsible for the massive water weathering of the Sphinx. Bob Schopp put an end to that discussion years ago.
What is it, pollution?
It's just the general water table of the Nile is rising.
No. Responsible for the weathering.
Oh, just the solubility of water. I mean, just water itself dissolves stuff.
All right.
You know, drop sugar in a coffee cup and see what happens.
Sure.
So limestone is eroded by water. It's dissolved. It is water soluble, which is the term. So if the water table is rising, and I do believe that's in part because of the industrialization and megalopolis that Cairo has become, and probably the dams and the bridges built over the Nile are in part responsible for this, and as well drilling for water. You know, when you're in a country in a desert, they've been drilling a lot of wells to try to find more water,
Right.
because they are critically dependent on water, and the Nile is not adequate now for the increasing population.
You would think that would drop the level, not raise it.
Well, it has to do with water pressure in aquifers, and the fact is that it is common knowledge among geologists that the water table has been rising over the last 50 to 100 years under the Giza Plateau.
Right.
And in fact, there are tunnels and chambers that friends of mine have actually explored that they now have to use scuba gear under the plateau. Because they've been flooded by water from the Nile rising. General water table elevation. This is not, however, what is responsible for the erosion of the Sphinx. So we know that there's a lot of stuff under there, to get back to our central theme.
Yes.
That has not been properly cataloged and listed in the mainstream Egyptological journals, because the Egyptians have been, since they threw everybody out, very secretive about their monuments, their plateau, their pyramids, their Sphinx, their country, as they probably have a perfect right to be, because as new, colonies throwing off the colonialist powers, they have been asserting from Nasser on an understandable nationalism.
Sure.
Which means it's very difficult to get good knowledge as to what is still down there. And it's even more difficult to get good knowledge as to what was snuck out by the French or the Germans or the British and is wound up, in Berlin or in Paris or in the Louvre or in London in the British Museum. We know a lot of stuff left Egypt. And, tracking back who got what when and what it said and what it decoded to is impossible. All you have to do in this game, and we're going to play this kind of intellectual game tonight, is lay out a possible trail, a logical trail for how people could know things that the general population does not know, particularly if they're in the business of wanting to know stuff.
All right. If there are, I want to ask this, if there are 9 chambers, let us, as a working assumption, 9 chambers, we know for certain that we have been in. How many of that 9?
We don't know anything for certain.
All right. How many of that 9 do we know we have been in?
We don't know. It's all rumor. We're going to find out in the next couple of months, and I will give you a date when we're going to find out. From our own data, a prediction of when this will be revealed. And remember, I've been invited by one of the key players, participants, to be part of that unveiling, so we're going to see whether my invitation after tonight still holds good. I am running some risk of being forever barred from Egypt by doing the show the way we're going to do it tonight, all right?
You could be thrown in a pit and...
Well, I could never be let in, and I obviously would like to be there. But in this case, since we already now know what's going to happen, that's what science can do. It can predict what's going to happen without you ever being there.
Mm-hmm.
We have other people who are, frankly, much better at being there than I am, i.e. Egyptians who we're talking to. And they're going to report to us, and perhaps even get it on film, on tape, what actually happened. So whether we're there or not is somewhat irrelevant. We will have a presence there when these events go down, even if politically suddenly we're persona non grata. So it's more important, I think, to tell your audience and you tonight what it is we think we got, and the connection with NASA. This is a critical thing. The exquisite connection with NASA that should not exist if this was all it's been cracked up to be.
So you're going to blow our invitation, huh?
Well, maybe mine. I don't know if it's yours. Anyway.
All right. Anyway,
the fact that I have not received the call I was expecting midweek.
All right, look, I'm
already very, very...
Yeah, let's tell what's going on, all right? There's a rumor floating around on the internet, I can certainly do it this way, which says that Zahiwas has been removed from Giza, that in fact Zahi Hawass is now in a different part of Egypt. And this rumor goes on, I've received it from at least 10 different people trying to confirm it, that the Fox News group, camera crew, along with, what's his name, Richard?
Boris
Saeed, who I spoke to, is now in Egypt. That with Zahi Hawass out of the way, says this information, the University of Florida project is going to proceed. The opening is scheduled, will proceed. Now, that may be only a rumor, and I've had, I don't know how many people all week long working on trying to confirm this, and they've been unable to, and that goes for you too, correct?
Yep.
You cannot confirm it.
Nope.
So we don't know what the hell is going on over there.
Now, I do know that I was supposed to get a phone call Wednesday, and I did not get a phone call.
Okay.
And I've been here, and the machines are on.
Yep. Something's going on over there.
And in fact, since we now know from our own research and investigation that tracks back to Mars and the connection between Sidonia and Giza, that this piece of real estate is overwhelmingly important, and NASA has known this for 30 years, I am not surprised we didn't get a phone call, because I believe that the players who are there are unwitting parts of a much larger situation, a much larger game, of which they are not aware themselves.
You are, in effect, tonight, it seems to me, beginning to agree with Graham Hancock.
Well, I didn't say I didn't agree with Grant.
No,
I have disagreed not with his conclusion, but with what he was doing prior to reaching that conclusion. And our main disagreement was, until we have this new set of data, this new evidence, I would have desired to have been there.
Under any circumstance. In other words, even if it was going to be some great fake,
yep,
you wanted to be there to be able to reveal that, or at least judge it for yourself.
I still do.
Graham wanted to call the whole damn thing off.
I still do, because I now know exactly what they're going to do, and I'm going to lay it out on your show tonight.
And you do think it's going to be a setup, don't you?
Yes, I do. And I think we can prove it.
All right.
And if we don't get on with it, we're not going to get it to
all right. Well, I mean, the audience,
a lot of
audience
people are
really,
going to be very mad at you.
No, not me. It's you they want to choke. I've got the pipes right here. All right, so go ahead, lay it out.
Okay, so where did we last leave it? We've been looking at this connection in this investigation, our enterprise investigation, between Sidonia, the monuments of Mars, and Giza for many, many years, since back in 1983, when I started to take this all seriously. And at the UN in 92, I was able to stand up and lay out the specific connections, geodetics. I then went into the mathematics of the respective sites.
Right.
We got geometry on Mars.
Okay, we've done that sort of already.
We got geometry at Giza.
Yes.
Well, it's the same geometry. The same tetrahedral hyperdimensional geometry I talk about at Sidonia,
yes,
is also found at Giza. Now stop there for a minute. Think about this. Giza is supposed to be this primitive bunch of stuff, 6.5 million tons of pyramid, and the Great Pyramid alone, thrown up by a bunch of savages who didn't know about the wheel and only had copper tools. And guess what? They've incorporated in the measurements and the architectural layout of these pyramids and this plateau the most sophisticated hyperdimensional mathematics and geometry that we have uncovered. Now that's a neat trick. And it begins to give credence to the idea that Graham and Robert have been so eloquent at putting forth anew, although they are the first to admit that they have not originated this idea. There's a lot of very important researchers who have gone before us who have all been looking at this plateau and saying it's not, an origination, it is a legacy, it is a descendant, it is something that was passed down from a time before. The Egyptians themselves did not do what's on that plateau. It was there from people who came before.
Right.
And this may violate some of the nationalistic tendencies of Egyptians now, but in fact the early investigators of Egypt, the French and the Germans and the British, all felt from their own scholarship that there was something special and unique about the plateau as apart from the rest of Egypt. There's no doubt that in the rest of Egypt the Egyptians did amazing, stunning, wondrous things. But those pyramids and that sphinx on that plateau seem to be unique, seem to be different, seem to be a time capsule from an era before. And that era we generally call under the rubric Atlantis, which is a kind of a general term for the high civilization that existed on this planet thousands of years before any known civilization. It comes down to us by way of Plato's tale, from Solon, from the Greeks, from the Egyptians themselves. And it's only in a couple of places that we have fragments relating to this mythical high civilization. What is stunning is that NASA tonight has a shuttle named Atlantis. And that absolutely has to be answered. We've got to find out why our space agency, out of all the possible names, of all the gin joints in all the world, why did they call the shuttle named Atlantis? The answer is that we now have found an extraordinary and stunning connection, a provable, on-the-record, documentable connection between NASA and ancient Egypt itself. And we have put it up on the web tonight.
Oh.
It is on our website.
All right. Hold on. You can get to Richard's website, of course, through mine. I'll let him give his address. Or he can, if you're used to going to mine, you go up to mine and get to it from there. You can get there from here. It's www.artbell.com. So, Richard's got new stuff, does he? He didn't tell me that.
In regards.
All right.
On November 3rd.
Okay, good.
The first installment has to do with what I'm going to talk about next. All right?
All right.
We need to give one brief refresher, which is the work of Robert Ballal. Ballal's claim to fame in the last couple of years has been as a civil engineer working in Cairo, working in Egypt, wondering about the pyramids, wondering how a modern technology, engineering that we now have in the latter part of the 20th century, could possibly lift 6.5 million tons of stone, of limestone, and assemble it with such precision. He came to the conclusion that we could not. As a civil engineer, that we literally did not have the skills or the money to build what's sitting on the plateau at Giza tonight. So if we didn't, then how could you possibly expect Neolithic Egyptians without the wheel and only copper tools? That's where Egyptologists differ from engineers, because Egyptologists can create any theory in the mind, they don't have to make it actually work in practice, whereas engineers have the disconcerting problem of actually having to make the things that they think up, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So Ball's engineering approach really strikes a chord with me, because he's done it. He's been there. He knows the problems of lifting mass against gravity and assembling it with precision. So it was that history that led him, step by step, and in his book, The Orion Mystery, he really lays out a wonderful detective story, where he came to this flash of insight one night that the pyramids not only were left by a predecessor civilization before our own, but that they are laid out on the plateau in a striking geometry that mimics, that mirrors the geometry of a stunningly brilliant constellation seen overhead in the desert skies over Egypt in the winter, i.e. the Orion constellation.
Right.
The most brilliant and visible of all the constellations in the sky. It's brilliantly visible here now, and out there on the west coast, it's probably slightly further south and southeast, or southeast in the sky. But it is the most outstanding figure of the celestial, parade of the winter sky. It looks like a huge rectangle with 4 bright stars at each of the corners, and in the middle, going diagonal, there are 3 bright stars called the Belt of Orion that are slightly offset. They're not exactly the line, they're offset. The last one is kind of up and to the left from where the other 2 are aligned. And when he was shown Orion in the desert skies one night by a friend, he tells the story in his book, the pattern that he had seen in the architectural plans of the Giza Plateau suddenly fitted over it, and he realized that what the Egyptians or whoever built them before the Egyptians had been doing was basically mimicking the belt stars of Orion thousands of years before the Egyptians themselves could possibly have built the pyramids to conform to that constellation. And through all kinds of subsequent work published in his sequel with Graham Hancock, Message of the Sphinx, he pins down the date in his calculations of stellar alignments to that wonderfully interesting date of 10,500 BC, when the precession of the Earth and the alignment of the stars and the, juxtaposition on the ground. And he and I have some specific differences. For instance, I, in fact, tend to think that this plan is much older than Robert believes. Robert thinks it only goes back to 10.5. There is another rogue Egyptologist out in Los Angeles named Larry Hunter, who has provided me with evidence that indicates very strongly that, in fact, this ground plan may be hundreds of thousands of years old.
Wow.
And this has to do with the placement of some very eroded pyramids that the wall, I believe, and Hunter believes, has misidentified with key outlying stars in the constellation of Orion, which, if those are not the stars that Robert thinks they are, but the stars that Larry thinks they are, it means that the proper motion, the actual drift of stars through space and time over an immense period of time, as we look at them from the Earth,
Yes.
would have moved them to their current positions from where they used to be. And so the configuration that the, quote, pre-Egyptians were trying to memorialize could, in fact, be hundreds of thousands old, not just down to 10,500 BC.
Richard, see if this strikes home for you. Let me stop you and read you something. Sean from Yucca Valley says, Art, please ask Richard at some point about the mind-blowing NASA Apollo logo on his website. The logo, the Apollo logo Richard Hoagland has unearthed, is a blockbuster. It has precisely the same look, feel, simple elegance, and straightforward symbolism of other NASA logos of that era. It is either authentic or a brilliant, masterful fake. NASA logo designs are anything but cryptic or intended to be easily decoded and appreciated even by the dullest member of the taxpaying public. Art, having followed the issues and enigmas concerning Cydonia, Giza, and the moon on your show, viewing this logo on the web blew my socks off. Its simple message of the fundamental connectivity between Earth, the moon, and Orion is undeniable, as is the implication very clear on the Apollo logo that traveling to the moon is somehow profoundly relevant to our understanding of Orion. To find such symbolism on a NASA logo is about as expected as finding a pentagram prominently displayed in a Catholic church. At last, a smoking gun. How will NASA possibly explain away this one? That's it.
I guess I can go home. Sean gets it.
Sean gets the prize, huh?
Yeah, the rewarding prize tonight, Sean goes to the head of the class. It is thunder striking. It is dumbfounding, and that's where my next sentence is going to lead. Because what we discovered, and I'm going to describe how we discovered it, and no, Sean, it is not a hoax. It is absolutely for real, and I will lay out in exquisite detail how I know. The official insignia of the NASA Apollo program, John Kennedy program, to land men on the moon before this decade is out, in that ringing declaration, is none other than the central constellation epitome of Osiris, i.e. the constellation of Orion, which is the constellation to which the Giza Plateau is laid out.
God, Richard, I'm on your webpage right now. I'm looking at the logo. It is astounding.
Now, what everyone needs to know is that Apollo is Osiris, is Orion. They are one and the same. Now, there is what we call Greek chauvinism in academia. You know, everything started with the Greeks.
Yes.
Civilization, democracy, Plato, the great books, you know, the thinkers, Spinoza, it all started with the Greeks. There has been this incredible Western chauvinism against anything pre-Grecian, i.e. Egypt, Sumer, Mesopotamia, India, etc., etc. So we go to the moon, and H. Silverstein comes up with the idea that we're going to call the moon missions Apollo, which itself should have raised a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Because why would you go to the moon under the aegis of the god of the sun? All right? Nobody asked. You know, it was a kind of a chauvinist era, so nobody said, why don't we go on there under the banner of Diana, which would make much more sense. All right? What no one knows is why, if you're going with Greek chauvinism, why do you use an Egyptian symbology?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that logo, the official Apollo logo of the Apollo program, and yes, it is for real, I'll explain how we know in a minute.
All right.
Why is it Orion? Why is it Osiris? Why does the real origin and root derivation of the symbology convey itself in the patch symbology per se and not in the name of the mission? That's the first level of chicanery here. It's like, why aren't they telling us the whole truth? Why are they hiding the real genesis of this symbol? Answer, they dared not tell us.
And they've known all along.
And they don't all along. Now, let me tell you how we know it's for real. Back when I was a not drive behind the ears curator in the Museum of Science in Springfield, I kind of moonlighted. That's a deliberate pun. I had a day job at the museum, curator of astronomy, giving classes, teaching kids how to make telescopes, going around to schools, consulting with the mayor on how to get tourists to come to see our science museums. And in the morning and the evening, I had a radio show, even before you,
Okay.
in Westfield, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And I would commute back and forth. And at one point, I had 3 shows, and I literally killed myself, with fatigue and all that. And I said, I'm going to get out of this rat race. But as part of the shows, I had a rather sterling cast of interesting people come through town. And some of those people included the Star Trek cast, people like Leonard Nimoy and Bill Shatner and Gene Roddenberry and others, and science fiction greats like Fred Pohl and Isaac Asimov and people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, Homer Newell came to town. Now, nobody in your audience, well, maybe not nobody, but not many, will remember the name of Homer Newell. Homer Newell, after NASA was created in 1958, became the first associate administrator for space science and applications under James Webb, who was appointed by Kennedy to be head of NASA in 1960 when Kennedy became president. Homer Newell, for reasons that now escape me, I guess he was lecturing at the Amherst or someplace, came to Springfield. And through interesting machinations in January of 1967, just before the tragic Apollo fire that claimed the 3 astronauts' lives, Grissom, Chaffee, and White, Homer Newell was pushing my 1957 Chevy out of a snowbank in Springfield, Massachusetts, on the way to the radio station to do an interview on my show in the morning. When we got to the museum, he opened his briefcase and he showed me a whole bunch of stuff, and I still am thinking back, why in the world was he taking all this time with someone who was obviously not on the landscape at that point?
Mm-hmm.
And among the things he showed me was that patch you see on the website. I had it from the horse's mouth in 1967. That patch is and was the official Apollo patch of the Apollo program, the symbol of Orion.
So it's
Real. Now, let me decode the patch for a second, then I'll get to where I saw it again and how we happen to have it now.
sure. By now, there's a lot of people looking right at it. So go ahead.
Okay. The patch depicts on the left in yellow the moon with a face, which we all thought is Apollo. It's not. It's Osiris. It's Orion. On the right, have the Earth. Familiar Cape Canaveral with a looping figure 8, the trajectory of the Apollo missions, linking Earth and Moon, going from right to left in a curving, lazy S, connecting the 2 planets.
Mm-hmm.
Going through the belt stars of Orion, with the Betelgeuse and Rigel and Bellatrix and the other one that I can never remember at the 4 corners of the constellation. And there's a huge A in the middle of the symbol with the 3 belt stars connecting across the A like the crossbar on a real A.
Right.
Except it's not. The A does not stand for Apollo. The A stands in Egyptian for Asar, which is the Egyptian name for Osiris, Orion. The multi-level symbology patch is Egyptian through and through. It is not Greek. It is not Apollo. It is pyramidal. It is ancient Egyptian. It is the Giza Plateau. It is a stunning connection between NASA and a place NASA has no business being interested in. And why do we have a shuttle named Atlantis?
Well, why do we? We don't know, do we?
No, not yet, but we will.
All right. I clearly see where you're going. Richard, I want to read you something. You believe that we're not going to get the real thing when this launch culminates in imagery. This launch on the 6th of November culminates in imagery. You don't think we're going to get the real thing, do you?
No, that's not quite true. I am basically taking out insurance against all possibilities. That's what good science has to do.
Well, I've got more insurance for you, and I want to see if you think this is reasonable, Richard. This is from Michael in Indiana. If the pictures coming from JPL from Mars in 10 months will be doctored or might be doctored, the technology exists today in the hands of radio amateurs and others, satellite first station owners, to aim their dishes at Mars and track its procession and record the signals on audio tape or hi-fi VCRs to feed into their computers for processing. All that's required is inside information on the frequencies used and the modulation schemes, and people with satellite dishes, 12 foot or better, and I've got one of those, 12 and a half footer, could take them out of their polar look and point them at Mars, lock on Mars and the signal, and do the recordings. What do you think?
Well, I mean, he's definitely right up to the point that I'm going to mention next.
Okay.
Because, you see, we have no guarantee that the signals coming from that spacecraft have not already been doctored. Meaning the photographs have been loaded on the tape recorder to be beamed back to Connus all along. Now, the new edition of my book, The Monuments of Mars, has just been released. It should be reaching bookstores, sometime this week.
Right.
There is a set of very specific documented reports of exactly this series of events occurring with Mars Observer in the time frame just after it was launched in 1992. Mars Observer disappeared for 85 minutes after launch.
Right.
In a kind of an eerie foreshadowing of what would happen, a year later when it got to Mars. What I have done from NASA memos and from press reports and sources is to lay out in monuments, in the new chapters, in the new edition, the 4th edition, which has a whole new cover and a whole new look and everything, the rather remarkable story of the missing data on the Mars Observer tape recorder that 2 weeks after it was launched suddenly was not missing any longer. It strongly appears as if someone uplinked data to that tape recorder so people wouldn't ask questions about why it had disappeared for 85 minutes. And NASA attempted to blame the incompetence of the DSN managers and the engineers. The DSN is NASA's Deep Space Network. They're the people that run, under JPL, this vast network around the world of these huge several 100-foot dishes with the microwave maser amplifiers that pick up these incredibly faint signals and amplify them up to where they're usable so we can get digital data and pictures. The manager of the DSN was so incensed that the people in Washington attempted to blame his team for incompetence that it kind of devolved into a he said, she said. And unfortunately, we don't know the end of it. That flash of brilliant starlight before the sun overwhelmed it in the dawn skies over ancient Egypt. That date, July 20th, was the date.
We're reconnected because once again I got to sleep for that time 2 hours, and then
on the moon, on the one day on the moon,
Unit 207 criminally and illegally once again
over the pyramid.
ended the live stream. They had some mail company that as soon as I laid down upstairs, banging on the door, telling them to let them in. We're rolling again, dumbasses.
What do you imagine?
You still got plans for today at 1 o'clock, or are you just continuing to try and deprive me of sleep before you're deprived of being able to use a toilet without doing it in front of a bunch of people?
That the landing only could have been done at that very moment, that in time.
Well, keep in mind that we have been looking at NASA data now, photographs, pictures, seismic evidence, the Lunar Science Conferences, a vast compendium of
Oh, I guess I got an hour. Laid down
Apollo
to get
missions,
some sleep.
The Clementine mission.
Heard the men
Are central pieces
/ man who came
was formerly occupied. There was
to help terminate the live stream.
All right. It is now becoming
Back and rolling.
clear that
Same tools
is probably
as
our
Kishana
stuff, meaning the human race.
came up
For that
with.
to be a logical, consistent,
You're about
scientifically supportable
to
statement,
go
it means
to
we
prison.
cannot be the first. All right. You and I tonight sitting talking on this technology called radio are not the first people who have ever used radio on this planet. That in that before time, what the Egyptians call in the pyramid texts, on page after page after page after page, and pyramid after pyramid after pyramid, miles, square miles of hieroglyphics denoting this time, called Zep Tepi, the first time, was that they were instructed to reconstruct, to rebuild, to reestablish a fabled civilization that came before Egypt, before the pyramids, before the ancient kingdoms.
All right.
I.e. Atlantis.
All right. Hold it right there, and we'll be right back with more. Absolutely fascinating. And the knots are connecting. We'll come back and connect some more in a moment. Richard C. Hoagland is my guest. This is CBC.
This is about taking back a process. And I can't very well ask people to put themselves in the line if I'm not willing to. So if I never get on CNN again, I'm going to be there at the South Gate. Now, 3 days before, Ken Johnson and I are going to do a very serious laying out of extraordinary evidence with graphs, with charts, with pictures, with memos, with documents, with NASA data, with some of the extraordinary material that Ken Johnson has preserved as kind of one of the few people of integrity that NASA seemed to have, that when he was told to destroy data, he said, wait a minute, why? And then did the appropriate thing. If we did not have people like Ken Johnson, and there are other Ken Johnsons in NASA and formerly with NASA out there tonight, and I am begging you, I'm imploring you, please come forward and provide us with corroborative data. We know that most of NASA was doing the right thing.
May I ask you a question, Richard? Even if you don't get somebody at the top, the committee of how many who really know the real story, and even though most of the little people at NASA, I use that advisedly, would not have the whole picture, indeed, many of them might have a part or a little piece of the picture. Wouldn't that be true?
Absolutely. And this is, Ken is a living example. When we got into this process, remember, we only met a year ago, and he stood up for us at the National Press Club at the press conference in March of this year.
Yes,
That's how rapidly things are moving.
Right.
He has begun remembering things, and he and his brother and his cousin, who's also been involved in Apollo, have been putting their heads together and comparing notes, and they've come up with a lot of other anomalies, things that at the time they just kind of...
They're also using a cookie to delay data from going to the live stream to Google. Spoiler alert, dumbasses, you're not delaying shit. You're about to go to prison is what's about to happen. Would you like to go to King County Jail today? I would like for you to, but based on what the Bureau said, it doesn't sound like that will happening until next week.
In boxes in the basement. And the most extraordinary things are emerging. For instance, we now know from Ken's archive, with absolute...
So your player bandwidth delay is being removed again.
This secret agenda, if I can use that.
Should I come upstairs and bang on the door like your dude did and just demand that you let me in?
Sure would, yes. Richard...
While running the live stream, would you like that?
You concluded that the time for the Brookings cautions had passed.
Yes.
And that it was time to unwind this, perhaps slowly. Then would it not make sense that the religious leaders, like the Pope, would begin to say things that would slowly lead the religious community into a more comfortable belief that, for example, evolution or something other than creation as the Bible states it might be possible and might be consistent with Christianity? That would be the religious sector. That our scientific sector would begin to date things and say, look, it's much older. Mankind is much older than we imagined. The artifacts much older than we imagined. And they would begin to come up with evidence like the rock from Mars and life from elsewhere, and it all begins to unfold.
Time really faster. It is a consistent picture. And remember, the church as an institution has done this before. The church ultimately accommodated to Galileo, not the other way around.
This was a remarkable statement by the Pope.
Yeah, it is.
And there are ripples coming all over the place from it. I've been hearing in the last couple of days, Richard. Believe me, a lot of Christians are very upset.
Well, having been a Roman Catholic and and having reconciled, the apparently irreconcilable a long time ago, you can't have truth arguing with truth. The God that I imagine is a God that, basically didn't create paradox and contradiction. The paradox and contradiction come from the fallibility of human beings in attempting to impose their interpretations on the reality of the universe itself. And since science is a process of figuring it out, of admitting and understanding human fallibility, that's why when you keep comparing my positions on your show now to what I said 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I gently remind you that this is a moving target, this is a scientific process, and what I always say is an approximation, because we're not infallible. This is a human activity of uncovering the truth, and it's a never-ending process. You never get to the end of the journey.
I know, and I'm doing it for a reason, Richard. I'm doing it because if I don't, the audience will sit out there and shred your credibility based on the fact that you have changed, seemingly.
I'm taking screenshots of your data delay, and I just erased your index database because you really are about to go to prison, you dumb fucks. I wish you would come downstairs and stop giving the FBI more and more evidence to put your asses behind bars for the rest of your lives.
They will, without cause, shred your credibility. And they'll just say, well, if what he said then is not what he says now, then why should we believe anything he says?
Well, that's because we're not a politician. We're trying to find out the truth. Now, let's get back to David.
Sure.
This connection with Egypt is so incredibly fascinating and should not exist. The real pièce de resistance here is when I got to the point where I said, okay, so we were flying to the moon under the banner of Osiris, not Apollo, which is connected to Egypt. We land on the moon at Tranquility on the date which is constrained by that helical rising of Isis and Osiris, not Apollo. What else is there to be mined in this fertile field? So we have some computer programs.
The guy
which
that
are
came
extremely good and extremely democratizable.
keeps
They are
replanting
astronomy software programs.
his data
Redshift
delay
is one
cookie
commercial name that we're using, which was given to me
via
by
his
Omni
criminal
Magazine, and I'm very grateful for that.
local
because without
storage
them, I probably wouldn't have tripped over
and
this for quite a while.
indexed
And you're able
database.
to, in the computer, either at a PC or with a laptop or whatever, with Mac,
So I keep
to literally
removing
put yourself
it
on the surface of any other planet in the solar system.
because
And
he
with your
really
memory,
is
recreate the sky
about to go
at
to
any
prison,
time, plus or minus thousands of years,
but they're so
with proper
cowardly.
motions and precessions and all the geometric factors calculated automatically.
They'll need to wait
How it would have looked.
Exactly. So what do? I set
until
it up for the landing
they
of
think I am
Apollo
asleep.
11 on the moon.
Right.
Now, we were
Obviously.
told, as part of our briefings with Cronkite, that the astronauts had
Since
to
I
land
keep
with the
waking
sun at
up
about a 10-degree elevation behind them, so that as they came
after
down
1
from
hour
the east, moving west in orbit on
to
their
see their
descent
hacks
trajectory, the shadows
and undo
of
them.
the craters and rocks and whatever would stand out in sharp relief, and they would be able
And
to make
screenshot
a
them.
avoiding instructions.
Makes sense.
Okay. So I factored in all the known data, and I picked as my source an impeccable authority. There is a geologist named Donald Wilhelms, who was one of the high-level geologists at the U.S. Geological Survey, who's written a brilliant tour de force of the scientific aspects of the Apollo missions to the moon. It's called To a Rocky Moon, published by the University of Arizona Press. Pub date is 94, I think. It's available now in trade paperback. It's got a beautiful silver cover with an Apollo 17 image of the Taurus Lutro region on the cover. I recommend strongly anybody interested in this, go out and get this book. Find this book. Because in this book is a very careful and detailed chronology of the involvement of science and geology with the lunar process, moving through the unmanned missions, the Rangers, the surveyors, the lunar orbiters, and then through Apollo, and then into the post-Apollo phase. It's a meticulous step-by-step with copious footnotes and a highly documented chronology of how we did it.
Less than a minute.
Okay. Wilhelm, in that book, documents the times and locations to the best that we now know of every Apollo landing on the moon. So I put in the coordinates for Apollo 11. I turn on the computer and let it run, and on the screen pops out, looking east toward the rising sun, the most astonishing geometric pattern. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon when Isis, Sirius, sister and consort to Osiris, whose patch they flew under, remember, was precisely at 19.5 degrees above the eastern horizon.
Wow. Richard, hold on. We'll be right back to you.
Wow, that is something, isn't it? You're beginning to put it together. Another dot. We'll be right back.
Landing site on the moon. So we have an Egyptian, an Egyptologist from Egypt, by way of Germany,
Picking
comes to NASA, comes to Belcom, winds up picking to the most interesting and intricate mechanisms, which Don Wilhelm lays out in his book, by the way, the Apollo landing site, which now corresponds, and we're going to lay this all out at Brevard Community College over and over again, and on the web and in other venues, landing sites that correspond to an intricate pattern of the rising meridian transits and settings of Isis and Orion on the moon. It's the most astonishing pattern you've ever seen. And when I've shown this to these engineers who figured out the celestial mechanics, well, I can't say what some of them have said to me because it's a family radio.
Right.
But their expletives deleted tell it all, because they realized in their gut that for this pattern to be real, and the computer and the data says it is real. There's no doubt that it's real.
No, I see the aha here.
It had to be the overriding objective of the entire Apollo program. Not science, not rock, not landing sites, not crew safety, not communications, not the lighting. Nothing else could matter, Art.
All right.
Landing according to this configuration,
Yes.
with limited rockets and propulsion and even the Saturn V capabilities, had to be the objective. And they've never told us for over 30 years. They never thought we'd figure it out. So we have the computers to figure it out.
All right. The knowledge that he used, if following this.
Yeah, let's assume that Dr. Elbaz knows more than he's been talking.
Let us assume
Now, he
came
took
from
that-
his own knowledge or his father's knowledge of
It gets better.
materials that
It gets
came from the
It gets
chambers
better.
beneath
Art,
the
Art.
space.
It gets better.
Am I right?
He leaves NASA. All right, the Apollo program ends. Dr. Elbaz leaves NASA and goes to Boston University,
Yes, sir.
where he sets up a department called the Remote Sensing Group. All right,
Really?
remote sensing.
As in remote viewing?
Well,
Related?
there are. Let me just say this: there are rumors. That's all they are, unconfirmed rumors
Yes.
about that. But remote sensing, in the mainstream colloquial use of the term, is basically using radar or sound waves or seismic, to find things you can't get to physically.
Mm-hmm.
But there are rumors. I will say there are rumors. We next see Dr. Elbaz in 1987, which is a good, 20 years after Apollo. It ends in 72. How many years is that, all right?
Right.
He's no longer with NASA, formally, officially. He's at Boston University. He shows up on the Giza Plateau,
This is 18 years later.
1987. He's there as part of a joint NASA engineer, National Geographic expedition to open the second solar boat pit alongside the Great Pyramid using Apollo NASA drilling technology, which was first taken to the moon on Apollo 15 by David Scott and used to drill the thermal drill cores.
Wow.
And, his interest in the Giza Plateau is demonstrated. He's also written extensively about the Sphinx. He claims it's a wind-eroded yardang. He is diametrically and categorically opposed to John West and Bob Schock's contention that it, in fact, is much older and was sculpted thousands of years before the contemporary Egyptologists would have us believe Egyptian civilization began.
Yes.
Well, now we have to flash forward the film. Because, as you know, in 1991, a German named Rudolf Gentenbrink, you know this because Robert Newall has told you, or I'm sure Graham has,
Yes.
and built this little robot called Upawat.
Right.
which found its way up the ascending passage, this 8-inch wide tunnel
Yes.
shaft from the Queen's Chamber, one of the two chambers in the Great Pyramid, up this shaft 66 meters over 180 feet to where in 1991 it found a door. A door with two little handles, one of which had corroded off, obviously extraordinarily ancient. At which point, Gantenbrink and his robot are summarily ejected from the plateau by Dr. Zahi Hawass, none other. Okay? That shaft, according to Baval, in concert with Gantenbrink's measurements, is oriented, is aimed directly toward the transit point of the star.
Now I've taken to not just deleting their data delay, but also renaming it. I just named it Nope as the key, Value as prisoner.
But one of the Queen's Chamber is aimed toward Sirius. His consort is in his double in the metaphorical, mythological metaphor.
Yes.
And at the end of that little 8-inch wide shaft, there is a door, and presumably there is something behind the door. Where is Monty Hall when you need him? And nobody has been in there for 4 years. Because the Egyptian authorities, as soon as the door was found, thought of every excuse and kicked everybody off, and nobody has been allowed near that door. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Now remember, this is a door at the end of a passage that no one has been able to get to until the 20th century. Why? Because no robber, however artful or devious or well-informed, could have gotten through the masonry, the 180 feet of solid masonry, through an 8-inch wide shaft.
Only that robot.
The robot, you needed a technological age to create the technology to build a robot to go up that shaft.
Sure.
Now, in the model that the pyramid complex of the Great Pyramid itself is a time capsule, what better place to put something of inestimable value, proving once and for all that the pyramids are not ancient tombs, but are in fact preserves of ancient knowledge from before the catastrophe that wiped out the previous high-tech civilization, i.e. Atlantis, than at the end of that 180-foot long shaft leading toward the star Sirius.
Let me be sure. They have never opened that we know of, right?
As far as we know.
There would be no way, short of a robot that could do the opening and examination.
Exactly.
It has never been opened.
Nope. As far as we know. And in fact, I can sit here tonight and I am almost certain that in fact they haven't been in there.
Okay.
And I'll get to why I'm pretty sure that when they go in, it'll be the first time. All right? Do you have a commercial you can go to? Because I need to go and get a document. I want to read you something verbatim. And it's at the other end of the complex here.
Richard, I always have a commercial I can go to. Sure. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
That Elbaz be hired. Ed Nixon was Richard Milhouse Nixon's brother.
No kidding.
The man who ended Apollo abruptly after 6 missions. And Farouk Elbaz's brother is currently on the senior staff of Hosni Mubarak, the current president of Egypt. To begin to get the picture.
I do.
So when I told Boris, my dear friend Boris Said, and Joe Shore, that the fix was in, because I showed them this data. You know, they're on their own tonight, and they have not called me from Egypt, and it's because they are involved in something so much bigger than they ever imagined they'd be involved in.
Is it true that Boris Said, can you confirm that he is in Egypt now with a Fox TV camera?
He called me from the airport en route. That's how I told you I was going to get a call from him. I know he's there tonight.
So he's there.
And the fact that he has not responded as he said he would means, as George used to say, that he may be in deeper doo-doo than he thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I warned him. And you see, the problem of being a prophet is that people don't listen to you. It's very difficult sometimes to know what's going to happen because, you know, you keep being told, oh, come on, it can't be that way. You're seeing things. You're one of those conspiracy theorists. Well, the history of the human human race is a history of conspiracy. That's what's so disingenuous about all the discussion of conspiracy these days by the mainstream, is because we wouldn't be here without conspiracy. There are positive and negative conspiracies. Conspiracy simply means to breathe together, conspiritu tuo.
Richard, what about Shore? He should be available to you.
Well, I think he was going. I think he's also in Cairo. I have not called him because I just haven't called him because I expected to get the call from Saeed.
Mm-hmm.
But tomorrow, in my copious spare time, I am actually going to let Sleeping Dog, serious pun intended, fly here, because I'm going to lay out what's going to happen, and we'll just see whether it takes place according to what we figured out.
And what exactly do you think will happen?
Oh, it gets better and better. Let's go back to 69. Neil and Buzz land on the moon.
Right.
All right? Now remember, they landed long. Did you ever wonder why they landed long? You know what the story is? That when the LEM pitched over, the lunar module pitched over from the high gate position, the automatic radar control landing,
Yes.
that when he took control of the spacecraft and the RCS, the reaction control thrusters that would kind of move it around as it was coming down on the descent engine,
Positioning, yes.
he saw there were rocks where the targeting was aiming them.
Right.
And, you know, in that great American tradition, man over machine, he took control and moved out of the way and got it around the rocks and landed 5 miles long.
Right.
Baloney.
Baloney?
Baloney. What I think happened, and I've now checked with some of the engineers who were part of the actual team in mission control that afternoon. And I've checked this with them, and they say, holy cow, you're right. It could have happened that way. I think that they got updates from the computers and the tracking stations on Earth to guide them to the exact coordinates where the ISIS 19.5 degrees alignment would occur. And that meant they had to land about 5 miles long. That meant information had to be radioed from Earth up to the spacecraft, but most of NASA was not supposed to know, all right? Because they're not in on it.
Right.
This is a secret thing. So how do you get information to the spacecraft when they're not supposed to be getting it? You hide it under a program alarm. Remember Stephen Bales and the 1201 program alarm?
No, I don't.
Well, there was a computer glitch during the landing, and they were apparently very worried that their computer kept ringing its alarm bell.
Okay, yes.
In fact, the glitch was to cover the receipt of data by the computer from Earth. The folks in Mission Control would never have known that a secret set of information had passed up to the spacecraft, telling Neil to land long and telling him where he had to land. So the celestial configuration would be confirmed. Now, what did they do after they landed? 33 minutes, and that time, 33 minutes is very important, as you'll see later on. After landing, according to 2 books that Buzz Aldrin has authored, as well as the actual mission logs and the air-to-ground conversations with Mission Control, Neil and Buzz celebrated with a chalice and wine, a very special ceremony in the lunar module at this temple site to Isis they had consecrated on the moon. While Isis is at the tetrahedral 19.5 degrees above the eastern horizon. Now, do you know what the hieroglyph for Isis or Sirius is in the Egyptian iconography?
What?
It is an equilateral triangle. It is a 2-dimensional form of the 3D tetrahedron circumscribed within the sphere. And it means, in the Egyptian translation, a doorway. And as I said at the UN, how do the Egyptians know? Because the doorway, metaphorically, is the gate, the doorway between hyperdimensional dimensions.
You think they were engaging in an ancient ceremonial something, toast, moments, achievements?
Well, I know they were engaged in the ceremony because they admit that. It's speculation as to which ceremony to whom, but if you know anything of your Roman Catholicism, it traces back to Isis, it traces back to Egypt. It's all one. It's all one. All right. We've got them.
Well, But what have we got? I mean, I clearly see where you've taken me to this point, Richard. What have we got? What is the next step?
The next step is Apollo 12. When Apollo 12 landed on November 19th with Alan Bean and Pete Conrad at the controls, Orion, not Sirius, but the belt stars of Orion, were located at 19.5 degrees above the western horizon.
Oh, okay.
All right?
All right.
Now, that landing site was, and this is where things are going to get really weird, so I caution you guys, tighten your seatbelts here. Remember, the Apollo 12 landing sites, these are all integrated together. It's like, have you ever played pick-up sticks?
Yep.
Where you have a network of sticks on the ground and you're supposed to pick them up one at a time without moving any others?
Sure.
And then also meshed together that if you move one, the whole pattern shifts.
Right.
All of the landing sites now on the moon, it turns out, are part of this Orion pattern. They're all part of a matrix. They're part of an algorithm. They're part of a fundamental code. If you move one, you have to move all of them. So one is the anchor, and all the rest work off that one. So 12 and 11 are connected. It turns out that if you were standing at the 12 site at the moment 11 lands, remember 12 is several hundred miles to the west.
Yes.
In darkness. The only thing that's at the 12 site is little Surveyor 3. Remember Surveyor 3?
I do.
The unmanned spacecraft we landed in 1967, right after Farouk Elbaz comes on board NASA.
Oh, yes.
The spacecraft that was landed on Hitler's birthday.
Well, this has echoes of an old show.
It does. At that site, if you had been standing there in your spacesuit in the frigid pre-dawn darkness of 250 below on the moon, with a beautiful full Earth overhead, looking toward the east.
There would have been Orion at 19.5.
No, Orion. In the ancient Egyptian paradigm, the celestial cosmology, the horizon and the midheaven or the meridian are exactly the same 3 points that are critical in the hyperdimensional physics.
All right.
The tangent is at the dawn and setting horizon. And the midheaven is 90 degrees, which is a key part of the physics. The ancient Egyptian cosmology is a code for the physics itself.
To what end, Richard? I know this is a level 2 question, please, but to what end are we following this little intricate, complicated, ancient dance? To what end?
Well, the key question is, why do they do it? And we don't yet know. I mean, I'm very honest. I don't yet know. I have suspicions, but I don't know. And part of what we're trying to do is be responsible, so I'm not going to say what we don't know. I'm going to admit what we don't know. That's why we need more help. There are people in NASA listening to me tonight at the Manned Spacecraft Center, at Goddard, at headquarters, all over, because we know. We know they listen. It's time to get to the truth here. It's time to fess up. It's time that we moved on. We grew up. The Founding Fathers did not imagine a society where you had a small priesthood that used public money to carry out secret ceremonies, billions and billions of dollars, without some connect between the leaders and the population whose pockets they picked to do it. And that's nothing more, nothing less what's been going on here. Now, I do not believe that that's what originally was intended. I think that Kennedy's idea, in consonance with the Founding Fathers, was to go and find this stuff and bring it home and then let everybody know after an appropriate, decent interval, after they knew what they had. But something happened. He died. And then, as with all power, power,
No, Richard. He was
been corrupted.
Richard, he was killed.
Well, he was killed.
Yeah, he was
All
killed.
right. So,
I don't know if that's all right.
well, if you really want to be Machiavellian, you might begin asking questions in that direction.
I might.
Not tonight.
But not tonight. Hold on. We'll be right back to you, Richard C. Hoagland is my guest. This is CBC.
And he works for the president.
Yes.
And we have proven, and we're going to lay out the proof at Brevard, 3 U.S. presidents are intimately involved in this pattern. Why not a 4th or a 5th?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's the only leap I'm unable to make so far. Because I
I'm
don't.
not asking to make any leaps. I'm just saying there's a pattern. Don't ignore. See, where most people go wrong in trying to do this is they come up against the brick road and, oh no, I can buy this and this and this, but I can't buy that.
That's what I just did. Yeah.
You can't do that. You must simply look at the pattern and then ask second level questions. But if you stop in the middle of the road and say, oh, I'm not going to buy that part of the pattern, all right? Anyway, I don't know whether it means anything. I'm just hoping that somebody out there knows something that we don't know, and they'll be able to fill in more of the dots.
My second level question is, and I really would like conjecture, since you don't have an answer, and I respect that. What can you imagine? I'll be careful how I answer. What can you imagine?
Careful what you ask for.
That this entire dance that we're doing to this ancient tune is leading toward.
Oh well, all right. Before I answer that, let me give you the pièce de résistance. Yes, no, I won't do it that way. We've obviously now calculated this same geometry with this incredible celestial alignment precision for Giza, for the Sirius doorway, the Sirius shaft.
Yes, sir.
Parenthetically, when the Voyager missions were completed in traversing the entire solar system, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and the last trajectory was defined after the last encounter of Neptune.
Yes.
Do you know where that spacecraft is headed?
Where?
Sirius. Now that means, of course, the entire Voyager encounter of Neptune had to be pre-designed to head the damn thing towards Sirius.
Mm-hmm.
Science be damned. I mean, this eventually begins to touch the average American's pocketbook, or scientists, or priorities.
Well, it's been touching our pocketbook right along.
Exactly. In other words, if they're not doing what they claim they're doing with our money, what the hell are they doing, and why don't we know about it, and who's in charge, and who's in control, and who's setting this up, and for what reason? Those are all questions to which I don't have answers yet.
Well, try my second level conjecture question.
All right, let me get back to Giza, and then we'll answer that.
All right.
So we set up the computer to run the opening of the doorway
Yes.
in the pyramid.
Right.
Guess when they're going to open it?
Probably July 20th.
No. Remember, things are processing and orbiting. It doesn't repeat like
You had me stuck on July 20th.
Yeah,
So,
don't, that's the anchor date, but it's for the geometry, not for the date.
okay.
The date is important, but only to establish the pattern. No, it turns out that the exact time to open this secret Sirius chamber is December 5th of 1996. At which point, the geometry over tranquility repeats precisely what it did that afternoon on July 20th.
So you're going to predict that they're going to open this December 5th, 1996. Public opening?
Huh?
Public opening?
Oh, no. The public opening is going to be all this nonsense around the Sphinx and the chambers under the Sphinx. It's the bait and switch routine.
Yeah.
All the lights, all the cameras, Boris, Fox, me, maybe, although I doubt it by now, there on the Giza Plateau with lights, camera, action. I mean, have you ever been to a movie shoot? Ever been walking up Fifth Avenue or somewhere in New York?
Sure.
And there's vans and there's lights. Everybody's watching.
That's right.
While we're all outside, gathered around this incredible opening of the Sphinx live on television, inside, secretly, up in that room, standing around looking at the monitors and the robots, will be Dr. Elbaz and company opening the secret doorway at the end of the Sphinx, at the end of the Sirius shaft.
Hey, Richard.
It has to happen. Now, let me finish my punchline. I got to get my punchline.
All right, punch.
Guess how many days precisely? And Keith Rowland helped me figure this out because it's on our website. And when I told him, he could not believe because I predicted this before he knew why it was significant the other night,
All right.
2 nights ago. We have a counter on our website, number of days since the lunar landing.
Yeah.
He said to me, it's going to turn over at 10,000 soon. And I said, holy cow, I'll bet it's December 5th. He did a quick calculation. December 5th, it will be precisely 10,000 days since we landed at Tranquility on July 20th on the moon with ISIS at 19.5 degrees.
Ooh.
So it recapitulates precisely again. That's when they're going to open it. And now you know, as Paul Harvey said, the rest of the story.
Well, you know what I have here in my hand? Your invitation to the opening. Richard?
These flourishing paper folks.
I don't think you're going. I don't think I'm going. They'll never let you anywhere near it now, Richard.
But you see, we have our sources. It doesn't matter. If this comes off the way I think it has to, you see, it has to. All kidding aside, this is mandated by such a high level of seriousness that they can't put this off. This has to happen this year before the end of '96, because this geometry will not repeat. This is almost at the level of, can I even use the word prophecy?
Well, you can. So in other words, it can't wait.
Come off.
It has to come off exactly.
Which means we'll catch them. Now, of course, I really pissed somebody off.
Well, maybe you'll catch it.
No, we'll catch them. And your audience.
How is anybody going to be caught unless there's a presence there?
There will be.
Well, maybe there will be. Look at your invitation. It
No, no,
matters.
It's not my invitation. I don't have to be there, remember? We have sources everywhere.
Well, I'll tell you, and the audience at the same time, that the information out of Giza at more than just you is shut down. There's no talking coming out of Giza right now.
Anyway.
Well, not anyway. No, that's important, Richard.
Oh, no, I totally understand. It's because this is